Okay. So here's modern-day Turkey. Come down here. This is the Nile River. You have the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, kind of, sort of. Jerusalem's about right there. And then this is all desert, and you have the Tigris and Euphrates rivers over here. Huge area of desert right here. So you have Egypt, which is a huge civilization down here. Egypt, and you know all the stories. Joseph goes there. Actually, Abraham goes there, and then you kind of have Israel and Egypt, second season or episode 2, and that's when they're taken captive, and Israel grows from a number of families into a gigantic nation. Then you have the Exodus and so on. So Egypt is one of these cultures, and Egyptian stories and Egyptian beliefs are shared by all the other people. So up here would be what eventually becomes the Assyrians. It's the Hittites along the way. And then over here, between the rivers, is Mesopotamia. And this one of all of the... So actually, all of these cultures have a lot in common. They shared a common thought world. They had similar kinds of beliefs about the spiritual world and about gods. And their stories are somewhat similar. And we're going to see that in spades next week, because we're going to find out that there are actually numerous flood stories. And this is one of the things we have to take into account. Why did God give us the flood story the way He did? Because and I'm actually going to give you a reference. I'm going to have you go look it up. Anyway. But this whole area, they share a lot in common. The interesting thing is this: there's no Hittites anymore. There are Egyptians, but they're not what they were 2,000 years or 4,000 years ago. The Jews are still here. There's something going on with these people because of what God is doing in them and the fact that they wrote a book. They're the only culture in all of these that actually wrote a book. And that book is basically our Old Testament. And I wish we had time, because the story of how we get the Old Testament is actually pretty fascinating. But they share a lot of things in common. And so this is, I'm going to talk about, I'm referring to this because I'm going to go back and do a little review about Genesis 1 through 3. So Genesis 1 through 3 says basically that all of reality consists of the heavens, in the plural, and the earth. And actually, when you read what the other cultures have produced, it's very similar. The deal is this, because I showed you a picture of what the Egyptians believe. For the Egyptians, the heaven is not made by God, the heaven is a God. The earth is not made by God, the earth is a God. And all of the things that are in the universe are gods. And your job as a human is to sort of figure out which one to sacrifice to so that you get them on your side to give you fertile crops, better animals, and children. Because there's no Social Security, there's no 911. You're just on your own. What we find out as we read through Genesis 1 particularly is that all of creation is designed as a temple. When you look at what because the other cultures have fairly similar stories, and particularly at the end where it says that God, it's because you can, the word is Shabbat, and it can mean rest or stop. And actually, in the Bible, what it's saying, God worked hard for 6 days, and then He was exhausted and He'd take a break. No. It means basically that the universe is now ready. It is a temple in which humans can be safe and they can worship Him. And that kind of thing is common throughout the ancient Near East, except that in the other stories, and I'm going to ask you to read one of them, the universe comes about through a war or continual battle. And the gods are not your friends. They're constantly fighting one another. It's a very, very different picture that you get in Genesis. All right, so Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, you get another story. You basically get, in this one, I call this the view from 30,000 feet. This one is up close and personal. You have two stories. You can call them A and B. This one, you just have the word God, and it's actually the word Elohim. In the second story, which starts with, it's chapter 2, verse 5, and it goes to 2, I think it's 24. This story, you have Yahweh Elohim. So even God is addressed more personally. Somebody asked me, you asked me that the other, I think it was you or was it somebody else? What was the question? I thought that's a really good thing. These stories overlap a lot because of the topics that they use, that they're addressing. But it's a challenge to make them fit into one continuous narrative. Our idea is like I said last week, you turn a camera on, and Genesis is just a video of everything that God does, one thing after another. It isn't. Partly because the way Hebrews think is what I call a bada bing, bada ba. So you have, in the Psalms, you have the first part of the verse, and it says it one way, and then the second part of the verse, which says it similar but a little bit different. And you get something, the tension between the two is something unique. And it happens at the level of stories. So God decided that he was going to use these two stories to explain to his people, this is where things come from. So think of God as, well, he's borrowing from all of the stories around him because that's what people understand. And he's shaping these stories through the person who's writing them. And Moses played some kind of a role in this. We don't really know exactly how this all happened. Moses plays some kind of a central role in it. But these stories, they overlap, but they don't fit perfectly because you have different names for God. But they are very clear in what they say about God. Okay, are you with me so far? Yep. Questions? Problems with this? No? Okay. All right. Then when you get to Genesis 3, so the first two parts of the story are there's the cosmos is, and back here to heaven. The heavens are unseen. They are mostly invisible. And when we talked about the way it's actually described, it says, and God put the rakia between the water above, so H2O, okay, I'm sure that they didn't have H2O, I mean they had water, okay. And the rakia actually stretches up like this, and it's flat on the earth. So the heavens is not the thing, the heavens is not the roof, the heavens is everything from the earth up to the roof. It's the entire realm. It's invisible, and it's filled with beings. The overwhelming majority of whom are God's servants. So if there's, I don't have time to do it today, but we might do it next week. If you look at other places in Scripture, what you get is a description, Job 38 and 39, you get a description of creation. And God populates, so God makes all the angels, what we call angels. These are they are also called Elohim, but they're servants of his. They're the invisible servants. He makes human beings as the visible servants who are on earth. We occupy a very unique role because we're the only ones, the Bible says as human beings, because we're all Adam, we're the only ones that bring heaven to earth because we're on earth. It is what we're going to find out here later on is that these other spiritual beings, what we would call angels, they're called sons of God, B'nai Elohim. They have a certain limited ability to do that, but they really can only do something when they do it through us. That's why we're so important. And that's why the serpent goes after Eve. See, here's the deal. Men, this is my way of saying it. Men protect the present. Women bring the future. Because only women can make children. So if you're a divine being and you want to mess up God's plan, you don't go after the man. You go after the woman because she's the future. Wonderful and scary. So what we're going to see when we get into chapter 6 is a kind of a replay of the enemy coming at the woman. Only this time they do it differently. Now here's another thing that's going on. When we read the Bible, we get the first 11 chapters of Genesis are extremely compressed, because the people who were listening to the stories knew all of the background. They knew all this stuff. Just like, I'm trying to think of an example here. When I watched, did anyone, 1977 Star Wars, when it first came out? Anybody there? Okay, what struck me when I watched it, I thought, oh, this is an aircraft carrier movie. It is it's Errol Flynn with swords. It was all these movies crunched together. And because I knew all the other movies, and I'm watching it in science fiction, it sort of made sense to me because I knew all the stuff in the background. The ancient audience, so God, the people that God's addressing in this, they know all those stories. We don't. We know some of them. And this is one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do. I'll bring it up here now because I just think it's worth doing.
So Star Wars is still going on?
Oh yeah. Well, okay. We're gonna come back to this because there's some stuff here. I'm gonna send you these slides. This is it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I really encourage you to read it. It will give you an understanding of how the Old Testament is working, particularly these creation stories, that you wouldn't get otherwise. It's part of the fruit of scholarship. When you can read some of these other stories, and there's 3 or 4 that are really important, but I would argue this is the best one, because in this is one of when you read about Gilgamesh, you're actually reading about someone who shows up in chapter 6 in Genesis, not by name, but by reputation. So anyway, go take a look at it. They had all of this knowledge, they had all kinds of ideas and images in their heads because of the world they live in. And we're kind of like outsiders. It's almost like we were visiting an exotic island. We're trying to understand the statues and the culture of the people. And that's my job as like a tour guide. I'm trying to help you understand this because once you get on the inside, the Old Testament makes a whole lot more sense. It really is, it's an extremely powerful book. Well, the whole Bible is extremely powerful. And here's one of the reasons I think it's so important. Every culture tells some kind of a giant story, and its story is so big and so intricate you probably could never tell it all. But the story has ideas in it, words, images, and you just sort of know it. You grow up in your family and you get a version of it from your family. Then you go to school and you get another kind of version of it. Here's the challenge for the Hebrews. They grow up in a very nasty neighborhood. All of their neighbors believe in multiple gods, practice human sacrifice, ritualized sex, and they think it's normal because the gods taught them to do it. Does that sound a little weird? So Genesis is when God says, here's what really happened, here's what's really going on. If you will read this and meditate on it like it says in Psalm 1, your minds will be changed and you'll start to see who I am and what's going on around you. So Genesis is written to do that to you. The problem is you're not an Israelite 3,500 years ago. But it's still there because the culture we live in right now also has a giant story. It's been definitely influenced by the Bible, but it's not Christian anymore. And so for me, these stories are not just, well, that was then, and wasn't that interesting they had that. They're actually very powerful stories about today. And for one reason particularly is that human beings are the ones who are right here. We bring heaven to earth. Still the same. You are constantly doing this. Your mind, so your rational thinking, your dreams, intuitions that you have, visions you see, that's actually an aspect of heaven because your mind is in that. You're partaking of that all the time. And when you do something as simple as make lunch, you're taking an idea and turning it into a physical reality. You cannot avoid that. If you're human, you're always doing it, one way or another. Yeah.
I have to ask before I forget.
Okay.
When and why did all these entities come upon the earth during Adam and Eve?
They were there. Well, what we get in Genesis, there's another creation story, and you get bits and pieces of it in, I want to say it's Isaiah 14. I'm trying to remember now where this is. Job 38 and 39, when the sons of God, when they sang for joy at creation, they are created also. We don't get the story of their creation, but they are created beings. And a small minority of them decided to rebel. And you get that story in Isaiah and Ezekiel. You actually had, it's told, yeah. C.S. Lewis said, if you give somebody if you give a group of people the right to choose, half of them will do what you don't want. So what we think is there's actually two creation stories. There's an initial story where God makes all of the spiritual beings, and they're called myriad. Actually, there's so many of them you couldn't count them, and they're there because heaven is not limited by space. And this is a problem for us because we think in terms of GPS coordinates or XYZ, Cartesian coordinates, that kind of thing. That's the world we live in. It's extremely physical. It's ridiculously physical. In the ancient world, they didn't have that. I'll put it this way. We're really good at the physical world in the way that ancients weren't, but they're way better in the spiritual world in the ways that we're catching up on. And that spiritual world is coming back in a major way.
And I imagine their capacity to think and receive was highly developed, while man has diminished in their brain capacity.
I don't know. I'm not sure you're getting that. I don't. What's the evidence for that?
Well, they say that when Adam was created, well, they say that he operated in 100% of his brain, and today he's only operating in 10%. So as their age diminished, so their capacity to think and
it's an interesting theory. I don't think that's what the Bible's saying. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know where you'd get that. First of all, how you'd have to measure Adam's intelligence, and how would you do that?
he was able to name and all the animals and
okay, all right. So you had to be pretty smart to do that. Okay, all right. Okay, I see where you're coming on that. Yeah.
To that, they used to say that we only use 10% of our brain, but I think that's already
outdated.
Outdated, yeah.
Yeah.
Because now they're finding out, there's these other areas, whatever, that we are using, but they just haven't figured out yet how.
Yeah.
So neurology is
Yeah.
developing. I've heard that argument before, like, Adam had 100%, that's why he could remember all the names of all the animals that he gave him, and we just diminished, but maybe that's just a lie. To tell us we're dumb, I don't know.
Did the fall affect brain ability?
Well, okay. I guess you could say the brain. What it does is it affects the human heart. Biblical anthropology is not based on anatomy. It's based on observation and revelation. When we think of the human heart, we think of this pump here in the middle. The knowledge of human anatomy is relatively new. For centuries, you could not cut a human. The only way you could know about anatomy is you got people that were killed in war, and you'd look at them and maybe figure it out. So actually dissecting people and figuring out where the organs are, that's something that happens, I want to say, in the 17th century in Europe, because you weren't supposed to. It was you were violating a person's body. So the idea of a pump, the heart in the Bible, biblical anthropology, heart and spirit are very close together. Your heart, the closest thing we have to it is your will that's developed over time through your experience. So it's like a lens. Your heart is a kind of a lens through which you view reality, and your spirit is the power to live that's given to you by God. And that gets broken. So you have in Jeremiah, he says, the heart of man is desperately wicked. who can know it. And we'll get there pretty quick if we can get that far, because that's almost word for word what you hear Yahweh say in Genesis 6.
Can we make this a 12-week class?
We all agree.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to go to the Bible. I love the Bible. I've always been fascinated by Genesis. Okay. So we were in chapter 4. What I want to do is I want to do a little bit. Here's one of the things I'm concerned about. It's very easy to use Bible study as a kind of intellectual toy, like, oh, isn't this cool? Is this interesting? That's not wrong, but God gave us the Bible because He wants to transform the way we think. He wants to transform our imaginations, renew them, baptize them. And in order to do that, it is partly reading, but it's actually meditating. So for me, studying the Bible is a form of meditation. I will read it out loud. I will often what I come away is questions like, okay, what does that mean? What's going on there? Cool thing is, because of the internet now, you have access. If you go to Bible Gateway, there's a bunch of websites, and you can get Bible commentaries that will give you verse by verse. So, I mean, what I'm doing for you is sort of a curated tour, but you can do this on your own. But the point is that you don't want to approach the Bible without praying, because this is the Word of God. You want to know what the truth is in such a way that it changes you. And part of that is by exploring it, thinking, okay, God, what were you doing here? And then you're asking the Holy Spirit, so how does this apply to me? And the two takeaways for me have been that it just really knocked me on the head is the spiritual world is extremely real. It's invisible, but it also runs by different rules. It doesn't follow the rules of physical logic. It is logical in a way, but it's all symbolic. But it's quite real. It is as real as the physical. It just doesn't run by the same rule. It doesn't run by, the gravitation and particles and so on. It's a totally different kind of thing. In Star Trek, James Kirk would say, "Space, the final frontier," and I know, heaven, that's the final frontier, because there's so much more of it. And that's why it's in the plural, because it's these multiple dimensions. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this through. Yeah, and we're going to meditate. We're just going to do this once. We're going to go through it. I'm going to read it out loud to you, and I want you to ask the Holy Spirit to highlight something to you. Is there something you go, what is that? Or, ooh, I've never heard that before. Something happens when you read the word out loud. That's what Paul says. Faith comes by hearing the word of God. So I'm going to read this out loud. We're going to invite the Holy Spirit, and then let's see what you come up with. I'm very interested to find out what you think and see, because that gives me an idea of where you are and what you're thinking. Okay, so Augen zu. Seid ihr bereit? Okay, close your eyes. Holy Spirit, we invite you, Lord. You inspired Moses and others to write this stuff, to put it down. They knew all kinds of things that we don't know, but you've given us this. And we ask, Holy Spirit, that you would highlight to us questions, insights, because we don't just want to read out of interest. We want to read because we want to be changed. Cain was intimate with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was building a city, and he named the city after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehujael. Mehujael was the father of Methushael, and Methushael was the father of Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives for himself. The name of the first was Ada, and the name of the second was Tzillah. Ada gave birth to Jabal, who was the first of those who live in tents and keep livestock. The name of his brother was Yubal. He was the first of all who play the harp and the flute. Now Tzillah also gave birth to Tubal-Cain, who heated metal and shaped all kinds of tools made of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. You wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for hurting me. If Cain is to be avenged 7 times as much, then Lamech 77 times. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk to the people next to you. It's chapter 4, verses 17 through 24. What do you come up with there? What's catching your attention? You got 2 minutes. Go.
I think
2 minutes. Did it disappear again?
Yeah, but it's not showing on that either, so.
Okay. Something that a question or something that showed up for you. Okay, 3. Okay, I'll let you have 1 because we have to share. Got to share the pie here.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll go with Enoch. Enoch came from Cain. Cain was so wicked. Enoch, this is the same Enoch that pleased God so much. God took him home when he was only 300 years old.
No, but good for you that you saw this. Okay, here's what happens. Here's what happens. You're actually going to, this is a thing right now, and this is why pay attention to the details. Good on you that you did this. So you have in Genesis 4 and 5, you get parallel stories. So you get an Enoch here, and you get an Enoch over here. There's 2. And you get 2 Lamechs. So when you get 2 of something, what do you automatically do? You compare them, and you're supposed to. And this is actually kind of interesting. Because we've been raised on NPR and National Geographic, and I want to know what the DNA of that man was, and how it's like, no, that's not where these stories are going. They're after something much bigger, and that is to teach you how to see what's going on. So even the way they do genealogies is not complete. If you read them carefully, it simply says, so-and-so gave birth, and he was so-and-so, and he was this age, and he gave birth to so-and-so. And he had other sons and daughters who are not mentioned anywhere. So the genealogies are very selective, but you're supposed to compare them. You're supposed to pay attention to where the genealogies are going, because there's an argument being made, and we're going to come back to that. Good for you. Very good observation. All right.
Well,
I'm so surprised. Go ahead.
it's just the fact that Lamech felt that since Cain was forgiven 7 times, that he was entitled to be forgiven 7 times 7.
It's not forgiveness.
It's not forgiveness.
It's not forgiveness.
What is that? So Cain is broken by his own sin. He commits murder, and he's experiencing this kind of alienation from God
from other humans, and he's deeply depressed. And he goes, if somebody finds me, they're going to kill me. And Yahweh says what to him? Or does what for him? Puts a mark on him, so that if anyone does something to them, they will be avenged. He'll be avenged 7 times. Okay? Now but you've caught on something here. Why is Lamech saying 77? Well, we're going to come back to this because there's actually it's being able to recognize these patterns. That's part of what you want to do when you read the Bible. Look for things like that, repetitions and changes. Yes.
Didn't these people know they were supposed to only have one wife?
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Let's walk back through it. So, what you get is first of all, Cain is intimate with his wife. Is he being obedient here? Yes, because what was the command? Be fruitful and multiply, and it wasn't with a calculator. Okay. So Cain is the fascinating thing here is that to a certain degree creation still works. He's being obedient. He and his wife have produced a child, and he gave birth to Enoch. Now there's going to be another Enoch later on, and your job is to compare them to see what happened here. Cain was building a city, and he named the city after his son Enoch. Enoch, interestingly enough, is Hanach. Hanach means grace. Grace. I'm sorry. No, I'm dedicated. I'm sorry. Have you heard? You know what the Jews have a holiday called Chanukah? It's built on this word, chanak, and it means dedicated. So the city is dedicated, if there's a pun there, he founds the city, in a sense, dedicates it to dedicated. I mean, there's a joke there, kind of a word play. Okay, all right. They did this stuff. They're doing this all the time. This is why you all should go out and learn Hebrew and come back in a couple of years. Okay, so he builds a city. And this is important because the irony is he could not go to any other city because there aren't any yet. So the murderer, the first murderer, the man who invents murder, that's the other thing. Genesis is full of precedents. And I don't mean like president, but the first time something happens. So Cain is the first one to commit murder. By the way, he shows up in a New Testament book, 1 John. And he's using an example of someone who hated his brother and killed him. But that, takes anyway, so he shows up again. He can't go anywhere. So a murderer who is cut off from all people builds the first city. So the foundation of the first city is built by murder. I mean, that just kind of, doesn't that make you feel weird? Because usually cities are proud of who make them. And this is a murderer who's built a city. Okay. Anyway, I mean, this is what you're supposed to do. And I've talked about this before. You read the first story and you learn all kinds of things. Keep it in mind, because when you read the next story, you're supposed to take what you learned here and apply it to the second one. You're supposed to compare and contrast. And the Hebrews are doing that all the time. If you get used to this, the Old Testament, but the New Testament too, but the Old Testament particularly will open up to you and go, oh, wow, I never saw that before. Because, yeah, well, okay. But anyway, so we're getting there. So, all right, okay. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehuel. Mehuel was the father of Methuselah, and Methuselah was the father of Lamech. All right, each of their names have meanings, but I'm not going to go into that. It takes too much time. Let's see what this note is. This is what I love about this. Okay, and Irad fathered. Okay, fathered. That's actually. The names all have meanings. I'm not going to go into that, but I am going to jump down here. So, verse 19, Lamech took 2 wives for himself. The first thing that would come into the mind of your average Hebrew listener would be 2 wives, because that's not the plan. So the great-great-grandson of the first murderer who forms the first city has now taken the step of having 2 wives. And in the ancient world, having 2 wives was a pretty normal thing. It's actually, in one sense, it's kind of efficient. Why? I mean, there's some sort of logic behind this. I mean, there's anthropological logic, but there's actually something else going on in the story. How many women died in childbirth before 1830? Maybe 30%, 20%, a huge number. So until about 1830, when you have the beginning of what we call industrialized medicine and things like clean water, just the basics, in the ancient world, half the children died before they were 15. The only Social Security you have is children. You need lots of them because half of them are going to die. And some percentage of them will be crippled and hurt. So you want to have a big family so that some are there when you're old. Now, old, how old is old in the ancient world? 30 years of age was about it for most people because you were done. You lived a very, very hard life. You were farming. You were standing behind a plow or herding sheep. You're out in the sun. You're out in the elements. They did have, it's pretty bad. They didn't eat really well. If there's a famine, you can't go to Costco. There's no food there. There's no Costco. So in one sense, you can sort of understand, if the chances are 30%, 20% that my wife's going to die, I probably should have 2 because I need somebody to take care of us. I mean, you can sort of see the logic, but it's not, let's read on because this is really interesting. So Ada, and their names are interesting. So Ada means something like ornament. And Silla means sweet sound. So you... okay, I just find it, there's a joke here. I think it's kind of funny, okay? And Ada gave birth to Jabal, and he was the first of those who live in tents and keep livestock. So the people who live in tents and keep livestock show up later on as the Midianites, and they cause major problems in the book of Judges. Here's where they start. So they are the grandchildren of a murderer. And the idea is that whatever your ancestor does sets the tone for your family and what goes on in your family. And that's still true. It's called family systems theory. It's still there. Actually, we've come back to realize the truth of it. The name of his brother was Jubal. And I mean, the funny thing is both of these are variations on the Hebrew word Yabal, and it means to bring. And so the joke would be, their names would be bring and brought. In Hebrew, that's what it would be like saying bring and brought. Hey, brought. Hey, bring. Okay, I think it's a joke. It's, because their names are puns. They're kind of, so bring and brought. So they play the harp and the flute. What's so big about that? Well, when we worship, usually it's with a band. Musical instruments do something to worship. They take it to another level. You can sing without them, and there are Christian traditions, the Welsh particularly, were really good at singing without instruments, and there are whole denominations that said we don't do them. In the ancient world, music was a very rare thing, and if you could play a musical instrument, it was like magic. You could create a mood, you could change the atmosphere by playing the instrument. Now, I have to jump here for a second because this is one of the places where the Bible goes in a very different direction. No, I'll wait on that. Sorry, you're going to have to wait. We'll come back to that. So the harp and the flute are used in worship. They are part of the instruments that are mentioned in the Psalms. And they are sounds that you would not hear every day unless you played the harp and the flute. All of the other people in the ancient Near East believed that musical instruments were gifts of the gods. It's not that way here. Yahweh says, no, they were human inventions. All right? Okay, well, we'll come back to that. So Zillah also gave birth to Tubal-Cain. So Tubal is a combination of Yabal and Cain. So you have these two names stuck together. who heated metal and shaped all kinds of tools and made bronze and iron. Why is that such a big deal? Why do you need to know that? Weapons. Because when you have bronze and iron, you can make swords, arrow points. It is the beginning of your defense or your war industry.
That was the atomic bomb at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, missiles are just big arrows that blow up. So, yeah.
What I find interesting that the first son is the one who lives in tents and has livestock, because we would think like how civilization develops, like in our thinking, it's like the cavemen, and they were hunters and collecting things, and then like the city builders would come somewhere
Yeah.
in the end, but here we have the city first, and then from there some people.
Because the point of telling the story is different. Who taught humans how to do animal husbandry? The gods. So these are counterclaims to say, no, all of these things. So because most of this is tied to Mesopotamia, because that's where they were there for the longest. They actually were exported. It's called the exile. They were deported to Babylon, and they spent 70 years, and then some stayed. But the Babylonians claimed our gods taught us how to do animal husbandry, how to play musical instruments, and how to create weapons. And Yahweh is saying, nope, those were humans. I mean, it's like it's a countertelling. It's the technical term is polemic. It's like, no, that wasn't a god. That was a human. Yeah.
It could be also that Cain built the first city that was walled in order to protect himself.
Right. The irony, there's no city of refuge, because usually for the Jews, if you did something wrong, because we make a difference between manslaughter and murder, but if you kill somebody's relative, somebody in the family is bound by honor to kill you. It's called the Goel, the redeemer, the kinsman redeemer. It's your job. So somebody in your family has to go get that guy. If let's say I murdered someone in your family, you would come after me. But if I can get to a city of refuge and put my hands on the altar, you can't touch me. So there's a little cooling off period there where the judges can come in and say, well, now what really happened here? Cain couldn't do that. So a lot of scholars had said he builds his own city of refuge, which kind of makes sense.
And likely it was walled to protect
Yeah,
himself.
because he's committed murder. I mean, well, yeah, the irony, because cities are such a big thing. The wonderful thing is that the whole idea of city gets redeemed because you have the city of the Lord, which is Zion, and then you have this heavenly Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. So the cities are not inherently evil, but the first one is founded by a murderer to protect himself. I mean, this is Hebrew thinking. Okay? Yeah.
Bill, King David made a lot of instruments. Was
Yeah.
it just for the temple? Because when he was a shepherd, he had
Yep.
the harp.
Yep.
So it was just for the temple, then all these stringed instruments.
No, it isn't. But what I'm getting at is that you know what? I remember now. I can show you this. I had the wrong slide. Let me see. It is this one. I don't know if you can see this or not. Can you? Okay. The Apkallu are the Mesopotamian gods. There are 7 of them. And they are part of the first generation of gods. You have Anu and, what's the other name? Freshwater and saltwater come together, and they mix around and they come up and they produce a first set of children who are the Apkallu. And the Apkallu each have particular things they do. Let's see. It's actually that one. Yeah, that's what I want. Unana, who finished the plans for heaven and earth. So he's a planner. Then you have the Apkallu named Unanaduga. Say that 3 times to your... who was endowed with comprehensive intelligence. Okay? Emegaduga, who was allotted a good fate. Enmegalaman, who was born in a house. Okay? So the invention of a house. I mean, all of these gods are where things start for humans. That's what the Mesopotamians believed. That Marduk is the master god, but these other gods have made stuff. And they, when we get to the flood story, we'll read about this. Emebulunga, who grew up on the pasture land, he's the founder of husbandry. You see where I'm going with this? But the Bible says, no, that was a human that did that. So the Bible's taking these stories and flipping them on its heads and saying, no, that was done by a human. Does that make sense to you? I mean, it's a counter story. Okay, and it goes on. So the conjurer of the city of Eridu, so that's magic. And there are magicians. Actually, magicians can do some things, because in Exodus, the magicians can do the first 3 steps. Then they can't keep up after that. And then there's Utuabazu, who ascended to heaven. So what you have, this is sort of the favorite way they're depicted. They're also depicted as like fish, because they survived the flood. I mean, the symbolism here is kind of crazy. But what are they doing here? That's a tree of life. Because the Mesopotamians had a tree of life. And the Apkallu take care of it. Who takes care of the trees in the Garden of Eden? Humans. Not supposed to eat from them. Well, not from those anyway, but humans. So you have similar kinds of settings, but very different purposes. Is this weird?
But couldn't it be that since God put the angels to protect the tree of life, so Adam and Eve couldn't go back and eat from that tree too? Like, first I was thinking they had flaming swords or something,
Yeah.
so the humans probably saw those and got the idea of making swords for themselves. So in a sense, they still got the idea from the angels.
But it, okay,
The second question was, or
Yeah.
idea was that that maybe that story got also passed on to the following generations, even to Cain's heritage or line.
Okay.
And the Babylonians kind of have a twisted memory of all the things that happened.
I suppose you could go there, but that's I'm trying to stay within the background to the stories that everyone knew. So I'm showing you some of the background. And it says explicitly that this guy invents metallurgy, which allows you to make swords.
Oh, this guy there?
No, in the Bible.
In the Bible.
That's what he does.
Okay.
So I mean, you can invent all kinds of things, but I'm trying to stay with the text. Okay, but I am showing you these Apkallu. They show up in they are those strange things that show up in Genesis 6. So I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Question.
Sure.
During the flood, I'm not sure if we're there now. During the flood, all the animals was destroyed except for the fish. Is that why that guy looked like a fish because he survived the flood? Or?
Well, he's a god, so he can survive it anyway. When we get to this will be next week. I'll bring in and I'll read part of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It blows your mind, but you can. I mean, the question is, so what is God doing here with it? But that's not where we are. We got to stay. I'm trying to stay with what the text is here. You guys are so great. You just have all these questions here. Okay, let's go on here. So anyway, I'm not going to go into all. I mean, there's so much here that we could talk about. We're going to skip. Okay, say, Lamech said to his wives. First time poetry shows up on the mouth of a human. This is the first poem. Ada and Zillah, or Cutie Pie and Twinkle Toes. I mean, it's kind of, their names are something, it sounds like that in Hebrew. Listen to me. You wives of Lamech, hear my words. There's the A and there's a B. So it said one way and then it said the other one. You wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for hurting me. What did his great-great-great-great-grandfather do? Killed a man. So he's done it again. But this time, he's proud of it. He's celebrating. This is what you call a war chant or a celebration chant. It's a song that he sings for having killed someone. And if you pay attention to the words, it's not a warrior. So I'm trying to think of an Lamech. Let's see, what would be a character that would match him in modern in our modern world? Lamech is a kind of evil Hulk Hogan. He's really bad. He's quite evil. First of all, he has 2 wives, so he's already broken things there, because Lamech is a man of more. If you're doing this, I'm going to beat you, dude. I'm doing this. And you see that, so he does everything more. Somebody dared, because probably what happened, I mean, if you read the story correctly, somebody dared to cross him, and he killed him. And it wasn't a man, it was a teenager or a boy. And he's writing a victory song about it. So as a Hebrew, this is both sad and wicked at the same time. He's the first of his kind. He is a boastful, murderous warrior. Now, not all warriors are boastful or murderous, but he is. So he's the archetype of the boastful murderer warrior, because there will be many to come on along like him. And you're living in a culture where there's no police force, there's no army, there's you. And if you're bigger and stronger and have a better sword, you'll win, unless you have Yahweh on your side. So I'm just trying to get across to you some of the stuff that's going on here. So then he says, and again, to top it off here, if Cain is to be avenged 7 times as much, then Lamech 77 times. He completely misunderstands what Yahweh has done. What he's done is he's taken what Yahweh did to defend Cain and to help him, and he's turned it into something that's now one of his weapons. Because if you come after me, God's going to kill you 77. So he's totally misunderstood what's going on here. And it's only taken 5 generations. So this goes back to my other point, is that what you have in Genesis is the story starts out here, and then each time you get an intimate view, the characters in the story are another notch lower. Lamech is much more wicked than Cain, and he's proud of it. He isn't ashamed. I killed a man, and dude, I like it. It was good. Just... you see where I'm going? Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, now, change of scene. How are we doing? Oh, we're doing great. We got another whole hour. And Adam was intimate with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son. She called him Seth, saying, God has given me another child in place of Abel because Cain killed him. And a son was also born to Seth, whom he named Enosh. Okay? At that time, people began to worship the Lord. Okay. There's a number of things going on here. Again, the story is really compressed. So the name Seth is, I think it's just Samek Tau. Oh gosh. Come on, Bill. What does that mean? Let's get down here. There's so much detail in this. I mean, the commentaries will take whole paragraphs on one word. I'm trying to do this fast. Okay. Come on. What I did during the summer is I did my own translation, and then I wrote a bunch of commentary, and that's what I'm referring to right now. This is going to become a book at some time. I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. Foreshadowing of exile, break, okay. There we go. God's okay. 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 Cities reflect their founders. Okay. Okay. Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the first was Ada, the name of the second was Zillah. Names relate to a character's behavior, but not in a predictable one-to-one fashion. The names of Lamech's immediate ancestors are potentially provocative, but there's no narrative uptake. Genealogy's trajectory, that's what I want. Okay, genealogies serve to link characters together, not just, as we moderns would tend to understand, biologically through their DNA, but more importantly, as a continuation of a way of life. The genealogy serves as a way to follow the trajectory of a progenitor's life and decisions. The point is to show how Cain's actions have consequences in the lives of his descendants who had no actual contact with him. That itself is a major insight. Because the Hebrews are in the presence of God, they see depths to reality that no one else sees. They see, particularly what they see is consequences. If you do this, it isn't just going to affect you and your generation and make the gods not like you. You set something in motion that's going to affect all the generations after you. And this idea of being connected to other people is something that the Western world has mostly lost, but it's come back mostly in an interesting way through psychology, because when you study family, when you study families or family therapy, you realize they say that everybody in your family is always still there as a ghostly presence. And I'm going, well, that's kind of what the ancient Hebrews believed, because well, I'm sorry. This is not the time for that. Okay. All right. Okay. Lamech's wives' names also sketch out their possible roles as amplifiers of Lamech's characterization. Ada's name can mean mourning or ornament. Is Ada a kind of ornament for Lamech? So she's a trophy wife? They are actually, their names indicate they're trophy wives because he's a big dude. He's the first nasty warrior. Lamech is married to 2 women. It's the first occurrence of polygamy in Genesis, and that itself sends a message. Gosh, what did I want? I was looking at something special here. What was it?
Meaning of Seth?
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. All right. Okay, you know what? We can do this. We can do this the old-fashioned way. I'll show you how the advantages of knowing an ancient language and having a computer at the same time. So that is 426. Let's go there. Okay, so this is a cool thing. And Adam knew his wife. So knew his wife again, and she gave birth to a son, and she called his name Seth. So I'm going to touch on that. Seth, the word Seth. I was right. Okay, thank you. I got the spelling right. It's a Hebrew proper noun, but when you look it up, let's see, because this is one of the cool things. This is connected to dictionaries, and let me see what we can say here. We can Seth. Oh, the word in Hebrew means compensation. He's my compensation. Now, I had to go look it up, but it's like, no, the name has a significant meaning. But you can do this. If you get one of these online commentaries, you can go look up. So what does that mean have any significance? Well, she's compensated, and she names him for that. So the grieving process is over. Maybe that's when we get it. But okay. So, but what you get with Seth now, so you have Cain, and you have a whole line of people. And now you have another son, Seth, and you're going to have another whole line. And your job is to compare them back and forth. The line of Seth is quite different. And part of what's going on here is that you see there may be families that are polluted by bad things that their elders have done, but other families can be blessed because their parents didn't do bad stuff or not as bad. And then you get this. So with Seth, and he's compensation, a son is born to them whose name is Enosh. And at that time, people began to worship the Lord. And the word here again is Yahweh. This reference here is kind of, scholars have really sort of wondered, like, what is going on here? the point would be this. Cain, so all of these generations up to this point are still aware of there is a God and his name is Yahweh. So they're still, these early human beings, I mean, one way to say it is they're all still monotheists because they won't be in a little while. Something else is going to happen, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So again, you take something you observe in story A and you keep it in your mind, and because later on it's going to come up and you're going to see something that's going to go in a different direction. This kind of storytelling is hard for us because we don't do it that way. When you write a story today, you help the reader a lot. In the ancient world, they told lots of stories and you had to pay very close attention, and people did, because in an oral culture, there's no certificates. Your word is your bond, and you better remember accurately, and people did. So the idea that an audience could track and remember something here with what's going to happen in chapter 11, that wasn't hard for them. They were really good at that. We need a little help. Okay, so chapter 5 here. This is the record of the family line of Adam. When God created humankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female. When they were created, he blessed them and named them humankind. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness according to his image, and he named him Seth. So what you get here is the first is statement, and then you get the details of how this happens. The length of time Adam lived after he became the father of Seth was 800 years. During this time, he had other sons and daughters. The entire lifetime of Adam was 930 years, and then he died. Okay, 930 years. Really? What's going on there?
They had different math?
They worship God.
No.
God changed the lifespan down the roadways after that, right?
It does change. Yeah, we're going to see that. Well, actually, it changes. We're not really told exactly why.
I understand that when after the flood, the atmosphere had changed, and the sun rays aged people long faster, or caused them to die.
You know, you're the perfect example of a materialist. All of your explanations have to do with science. There's something bigger going on here, and I don't have the slide for it, so you're going to have to take my word on it. In one of the Ugaritic tablets, they came across something like this. So they list a number of kings, and I want to say there's 7 of them, and they are 45,000, 67,000, 38,000 years old. What is going on there? So in the ancient world, when we think of genealogies, we think of DNA and, phenotypes and genotypes. And, I'm on 23andMe. And that's not the way genealogy is done in the ancient world. How's genealogy treated in the old world? There's some similarities to places today. It's used to tell a story. And it's also used to highlight. There are cultures today where, I don't want to say this. The age of a person it's honorific. It describes it. They're older than old. So to make someone old is not to say they went around the sun 890 times. It's a way of saying this is a really important person. And what you see in these genealogies is that the ages, they get a little longer and then they get shorter and shorter and shorter because something's going on. It's a function of the way they understood what was going on. So the age of a person is you use the age to honor them. And there are cultures today. There was a missionary. I'm trying to remember the story to this now. It actually was in one of the commentaries. The missionary said, "So I came into this village and I was introduced and I told the chief how old I was, and he could speak the language well enough. And the chief said, and we have a missionary from so and so, and he's 130 years old." And the man went over and he talked to the chief and he goes, "I'm not 130 years old." He goes, "You're as old as I say you are because I'm honoring you." Because we think of genealogy as biological, for them, you're describing a characteristic, and it's to honor the sort of special status that people had. I mean, and one clue to that is that we have a list of kings, and they're 67,000 years old. The numbers are a little off, but that's kind of what I'm getting at.
What verses say that?
What's that?
What verses say that?
This stuff right here,
Yeah.
that's not in the Bible. That's from some of the other ancient Near Eastern literature. I will do my best to go find it. But there's a list of kings, and so the one of the ways that you describe somebody as being special and having an honored place is you make them old.
But that's extra biblical,
It's extra biblical, yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
not really reliable necessarily.
It's not the Bible, but it gives us, what I'm getting at is that I'm trying to understand, why did they do this? Why are people so much older? And it's part of the way it's part of the way they look at things. It's because we think immediately 980 times around the sun. But that's not what they were thinking. They use genealogies and age differently than we do.
By the way, you can honor me by making me look younger.
Yeah. Okay. Now okay. But if you live in a culture where if you live more than 30, that's really special. So this is all a kind of a golden age when they're still in the presence of God. This is pre-flood. So there's all kinds of things going on because they're going to draw the contrast between before and after flood. Okay. All right. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. Seth lived 807 years, became the father of Enosh. After he became, and he had other sons and daughters. We don't know anything about them. They're mentioned, but they're not there. The entire lifetime of Seth was 912 years. Then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. So on and so forth. This gets really long, and I mean it's fascinating. But everybody's living pretty long. Where did I want to go with this? Okay. Okay, here's where I wanted to go. Okay, so verse 21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God for 300 years. And he had other sons and daughters. The entire lifetime of Enoch was 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and then he disappeared.
What did he do? How did he please God?
Okay, well, what does the phrase walk with God mean? He has intimacy with God. So despite all the things that have gone on, it is still possible to be faithful to Yahweh. Now, why would he take him? Because there's something coming down the pike he doesn't want him to go through. I mean, that's my guess. To me, it's a foreshadowing of a crisis that's coming. Now, here's the crazy thing. There are, I think there's fourth Enoch. I think there's a whole literature dedicated to Enoch. He gets 2.5 or 3 verses in the Old Testament. If you go look at first Enoch, he's a whole thing. I mean, people, Michael Heiser goes crazy with Enoch. Michael doesn't make Enoch into a canonical character, but Enoch, in what's called the Second Temple period, Enoch becomes famous. He has this whole career we never knew he had. He writes a book. He tells us about the Watchers. He does all this stuff. You can go read it. You can look up First Enoch. It is the craziest thing to read. Yeah.
I even heard that Jesus quoted from First Enoch when he had the argument with the Sadducees who said there's no resurrection, and then tell the story with all the husbands that this one wife had who all died and
Yeah,
who will never.
yeah.
And Jesus said, you don't know the scriptures, and he quotes, and what he quotes apparently is from Enoch.
So everybody knew the books. They show up. It shows up in Peter and Jude. You get these references to Tartarus. So Enoch was part of everybody knew it. Everybody knew the stories. If you are, I think I've talked about this before. If you are Ethiopic, Coptic, or if you're a certain kind of Greek Orthodox, then First and Second Enoch are part of your scriptures. They are not really considered part of the Bible for Protestants. But I don't have time to go into that. But that's
But Jude quotes Enoch.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Is that the same?
Yep.
The same Enoch?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, but Paul quotes pagan poets. Are they supposed to be canon? No. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are used because everybody knew them and they were available means of persuasion. Doesn't mean that they were canon. This has become a thing among a lot of people, and I don't understand why, but they just love it. I'm kind of like, eh. I like the Bible the way. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, I don't think because a book is quoted that it counts as canon. But that takes us in a whole other direction that we don't have time to go in tonight. Yeah.
Question about the numbers. You mentioned the years maybe weren't literal the same way we see years, but they seem significant still because with all the people they're saying after this many years they fathered this son.
Right.
So somehow they're trying to put some sort of value on who they were as a person when they fathered
Right.
that son, right? So
Right.
then here Enoch walked with God, or the entire lifetime was 365 years, and I have always noticed that and thought that seems like full circle, like 365 days to make a revolution around the sun for Earth. Is that significant? Like, what do you think they were trying to say by giving him that label, that number?
I don't know. The genealogies, I feel like I understand about that much of it. It's one of those things where I kind of go, God, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on here. You wanted it in there. Doesn't make much sense to me, except as you see that people live much longer, and then their lives begin to get shorter. So there's something going on there. I don't.
Thinking they're more evil, so they're not being honored as much.
Maybe. There's something going on there. I just don't know what it is. And the other thing is that we are so focused on what is measurable, what we can reproduce scientifically, and the symbolic world of heaven just operates differently. And so this is a mashup. There's stuff going on here. I don't know. I basically kind of go, I'm not sure. It bounces off my head.
I kind of wondered if it was literal, if it was even just a spiritual thing, like the further people devolve spiritually.
It could. I mean, that would make sense. That would make sense. Yeah. It seems to be honorific. It's a way of describing people who existed in a previous age when things were really different. That's clear because before the flood and after the flood, things are really different. That much is clear. I mean, if you walked up to an ancient Hebrew and say, "So why did you do that?" I don't know what they'd say. For me, it's still an open question. I really don't understand it. It's in the Word. It's true somehow. I don't understand, and that happens. That's a lot of stuff.
When you say really different, maybe you're going to get to that with the flood, but I'm kind of wondering, like, how did that one God, Baruch or whatever it was, like, how did that even, the idea of that God survive the flood? Because there were only 8 people on the boat, and supposedly they were Noah's family. So were there people still talking about these old gods that weren't, like, why would any of that come through the flood if there was only 8 people that survived the flood?
Because the gods don't die.
So they're just trying to, so it's just the enemy's way of trying to, like, bringing it back into the next.
Well, I mean, let's go there. Let's jump down here. Okay, so I'm gonna jump. Then Lamech, when Lamech had lived, okay, so here's the second Lamech. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son and named him Noah, saying, "This one will bring us comfort." And again, there's a pun because I'm sorry, it's a nun. Excuse me. This Hebrew word means comfort. So Noah's name literally means comfort. Comfort is going to bring comfort. So his name is actually playing an important role. So this is the second Lamech. Compare the second Lamech with the first one. Is this Lamech a super warrior who delights in killing? No. From him comes the person who's essentially the savior of the world. So you get the contrast here, okay? This one will bring us comfort from our labor and from the painful toil of our hands because of the ground that the Lord has cursed. So there you have the uptake on what God says in Genesis 3. You're going to work on the ground, but it's not going to give you what you want. Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah, and he had other sons and daughters, and the entire lifetime of Lamech was 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Keep that in mind. Okay, now we get to the juicy stuff here. Okay. Okay, actually, we're going to, you guys stand up. You need to stand up for a minute here. Okay, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. What is something you feel you've heard tonight that, something you've heard tonight that's been significant? Okay, find somebody to tell that to. You got to talk to at least one person. You get 2 minutes, go. How's it going? Are we getting anything? Are we recording? Are we broadcasting? Or is it just...
I'm just trying to charge your
Okay.
computer better. But yeah, everything's recording.
Okay, cool. All right. I get my phone back. Yay.
Yeah, I know. I was like, because it goes around my speaker, because I know it's been cold in there. Then I was walking in here, I'm like, I should have worn tennis shoes. Yeah.
Are you warm?
I'm a little bit low warm, but that's all right. I mean,
Okay, all right.
I'm not.
Because it's cool enough for me to wear my long sleeve shirt. So
But it is, the main thing is to have met.
okay.
Last year I taught another class.
Okay, I want to hear a little bit. I'm curious to see what you came up with. You're shaking your head.
Why do we compare? We have grew up in church, so many years, never heard these kinds of things. And now it's all like there's two different stories. And we're comparing, it's like, well, isn't it just okay to understand what I read in the Bible? Do I have to compare it to these other gods or other beings? And we discussed how did these teachings still go on after the flood? said, well, spirits were in the earth.
Well, the way I understand it, those spirits that intermarry with the humans became, they died during the flood. They became disembodied spirits that are, as you would say, call them gods or demons.
Well, there's a little more to it than that. I'm trying to. What I'm sharing, if what's the best way to say this? What I'm sharing with you, if you spent most of your adult life learning obscure Near Eastern languages and reading the history and reading the literature, this is old hat. People have known most of this stuff for about 100 years. What happened, though, is that most pastors, when they go to seminary, and I would include me, I never got this. Partly it is because the seminary I went to was very anti-supernatural. And the way you have to deal with this is you have to go, no, there's an entire invisible world that we are not well acquainted with that was just normal for the ancient people. It observed a different kind of logic. But most pastors have never studied this. I know because I've taught pastors and I've watched them go like that. Or like, how am I going to tell my people this? And I go, well, I got to start somewhere. The authority of the Word of God is not linked to any particular kind of interpretation that has to be historical. So what happened is that a lot of Christians went with the idea that everything in the Bible is historical and it's true history. It's like, well, it has history in it, but there's a whole lot of it that actually is describing symbolic reality that is historical, but it doesn't match up with history. It is its own thing. It interacts with history. It controls history, because what happens in the heavens happens on the earth. It is so, even in the church, the whole idea of the invisible world has been suppressed. There's a whole movement. What's the term? I can't think of it right now. I'll put it this way. The experiences that I've had in the Holy Spirit have convinced me that there are whole universes of things going on that we don't know about. Because I've had experiences that a psychologist could explain them, I suppose, but I've encountered things and sensed the presence of God, and it doesn't fit a material world. It was unbodily, but quite real. So we're talking about a civilization where that kind of experience is normal. And we're not used to it. I would say we're getting there. So if you've been raised in the Pentecostal tradition at all, then you're open to the idea, oh no, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And we're just beginning. But honestly, most pastors have never heard this. Because as a pastor, you're trained as a generalist. I mean, if you think of doctors, most pastors are trained to be kind of like family practitioners. Now, if you're an ER doctor, or if you're a surgeon, let's say you're a neurosurgeon for children, well, you get really deep training in a very narrow field. The average doctor would never do that. They wouldn't know anything about it. And that's part of the deal with the Bible, is that there's so much information, and people are, and if you want to spend the time and go after it, and actually you can do that now. You can go online and you can read, actually Michael Heiser is a really good place to start. This information does not do anything to the authority of the Word of God. It actually makes more sense. And you go, oh my gosh, this is real. And it's not all physical. It's mostly spiritual. It's invisible, but quite real. Yeah.
What exactly are you talking about right now? What information, what controversy specifically are you talking about?
Next week, I'm going to read to you part of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
2
And
weeks.
No, next week.
next week.
I thought next week that we're going to have the Easter or the...
I don't, what's the schedule say? I don't,
They said they weren't going to have no classes next week. Well,
I'm gonna check.
okay, you know what? We'll have to check that.
The lady who was just here who passed
that they're going to have worship all week.
She says we are meeting this week. Okay. We will send out an email to confirm that. I think we're meeting. So at any rate,
Get a context for all the stuff you were just sharing.
right. So what I'm getting at is that there's a ton of there's stuff that we've learned about in the last 150 years that no Christian and no non-Christian had access to until 150 years ago. And it's all of the other texts of the ancient Near East. When they first came out, they said, oh, the Jews, they just copied. But when you read all the stuff, you go, no, it's really different. They shared a world, but they didn't copy. So we're going to read a flood story that comes from Gilgamesh. There was a flood. It's so big, everybody talks about it. But the question is, why was there a flood? What was it supposed to do? So in Genesis, what you get is you get Yahweh's version of this is why the flood is here. This is what I did in it. So
that's the other question I had when I saw the picture of the tree of life. Were you saying that maybe the tree of life in the Garden of Eden was just a metaphor, like because God's trying to explain?
Nothing in the Bible is just a metaphor.
Well, I mean, like, are you saying there was a real tree of life in the Garden of Eden, but there was also one with this other God, or like I didn't understand what
okay,
what you were doing with all the parallels with other cultural stories. Almost all the ancient Near Eastern cultures. I'm not sure about Egypt. I'd have to check on that one. But the Assyrians and Mesopotamians, they all had a tree of life, and you can see it. It's a symbolic tree. It shows up in their iconography, and they have divine beings taking care of it. It's partly because when you live in a desert land, trees actually connect heaven and earth symbolically and physically. They do. They thought in a symbolic, spiritual way that we've lost, and I'm arguing we need to get it back. And one of the ways we do that is by you look at these other cultures and what they're doing, and there's no line between physical and spiritual for them. And to be honest with you, I think it's probably where we've drawn the line is probably not where it's supposed to be. Because even Christians we've crossed over, and you have whole denominations of Christians that don't believe in healing, I think they believe in prayer somehow, but it's like, how does that work? They don't believe in the supernatural at all. But it's so blatant, it's there. And you have to deal with it. And it's not scientific. It doesn't obey the laws of chemistry and physics, and it's a different kind of thing. It's quite real. So God has a home where he invites people in, and he does something with human beings there. It's a real place, somehow. And they go through some kind of a process where he takes them out and they become something special. And that's the pattern. God takes people out of their home, puts them through a special experience, and sends them back. And that's Eden. And then they lose contact with that. So I'm just summarizing. But the question was, why have I never heard this before? And that's what I'm trying to explain. What was this?
Well, all the stuff we're talking about here.
I see.
Okay. And what I'm saying is that pastors, something like, medical education or theological education, as a pastor, you have 3 years of study, usually, and you have to learn preaching and counseling and management and so on. You get some Bible, but you don't go very deep on this, especially if you're raised in a denomination that is basically post-supernatural. But if you're a specialist, everybody knows this stuff.
Yeah, because to me, we haven't talked a lot about real supernatural stuff yet. That's what I was trying to figure out. What did I miss? But,
Okay. Well.
But we're going to get into that, chapter 6. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
You said that they believe that some of these trees touched heaven or interacted with heaven.
Well.
Do you think that maybe the Tower of Babel was one of those they were trying to create a connection point?
We're going to get to that when we get to chapter 11. Lord help me. Just feel like I've opened. To borrow a different mythology, I feel like I've opened Pandora's box here. I would say if the Bible's starting to freak you out, good. It's supposed to, because it is filled with the power of God, and it will not make logical sense to a scientifically based person. It won't.
Sounds
because you're not supposed, you're actually supposed to be, you're supposed to be spiritually active, and that's what it's trying to do. Okay, so here we go, chapter 6. When humankind began to multiply in the face of the earth, and this is not calculators, they're not multiplying that way, okay? Daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw that the daughters of humankind were beautiful. All right, who were the sons of God?
You gotta watch House of David, they show that part.
Some say the Nephilim.
Well, some
It's like Lord of the Rings.
some say it's the sons of Seth, and some say it's the angels.
Mm-hmm. It's again here. This is what is your understanding? Is there a supernatural realm, and do you understand it? And part of it has to do with the Hebrew. And I guess a part of us is, hey, would you all just go learn Hebrew, because then a lot of things would make sense to you.
Give us how much time? A year?
Okay. Part of it has to do, when you translate a language, do you translate it word for word, or do you translate it more concept for concept, or do you mix them? So, and that's always a challenge. If you've learned a foreign language, you guys learned English. I mean, I've learned German, a little bit of Spanish, Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and so it's a challenge. So, a son of, that's a Hebrew for a creature of the species X, whatever it is. Or the kind, that'd be another one. They are B'nai Elohim. An Elohim, but I think this is maybe a review for an Elohim. What is an Elohim?
Divine creature?
It's an invisible, personal power. It's personal, so it has personality. It's invisible, and it can do stuff. And it's on a scale. So Yahweh makes all of them, and there's no God like our God. There's no Elohim like our Elohim. I mean, it's like, because he's absolutely unique. No other Elohim can touch him, because he made them. They're creatures, he's a creator. Totally, okay. But when it says the son of something, it means a creature who belongs to the category of. So these are divine beings. They're invisible. They have personality, will, and some power. Think of where have you already seen one of these? It wasn't called a B'nai Elohim, but you ran into one earlier. Chapter 3. The serpent is actually a B'nai Elohim. Because people in the ancient world would have known that, they didn't have to name it.
Did
So,
he transform into a serpent? Did he take the form of a serpent?
okay,